My name is Amber Dawson. I'm 34 years old, and the morning my sister called to tell me our father was dead, he was sitting 3 feet away from me, stealing bacon off my plate. 6:30 in the morning. I put the call on speaker. "Sis, Dad died last night," Simone said, cold as a bank statement. "He left everything to me and my husband. You get nothing." Behind her, my brother-in-law Braden laughed. "Finally, you're out." My father set down his coffee, leaned toward that phone, and said something I'm not going to repeat yet, because Simone didn't get to hear it that morning, and you'll hear it exactly where she finally did. But here's what none of them knew. The funeral they were already counting money over was happening that Sunday, and Dad had picked out the flowers himself. Lilies. My mother hated lilies. He said she wouldn't mind missing this one. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally get loud, with dignity. We tell stories about family, betrayal, and justice done the right way, for everyone who's ever been underestimated at their own kitchen table. If that's you, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe. 9 months earlier, in October of 2025, my biggest worry was a night shift schedule. I'm a registered nurse. I was working travel contracts out of Columbus, Ohio. 13 weeks here, 13 weeks there. Because travel pay is how a girl from Cedar Falls kills off her nursing school loans before she turns 40. My father thought the whole arrangement was hilarious. "You drive 3 states to give strangers their pills," he'd say, "and I can't get you to change my furnace filter." That was Moses Dawson, 73 years old that fall. Army, 1970 to 1974. He came home, turned wrenches for other people until 1981, then opened Dawson's Garage on Route 9 and ran it for 36 years. He sold it in 2017, retired at 65, and moved exactly nowhere. The same house on Maple Ridge Road he and Mom bought in 1984 and paid off in 2009. He wasn't rich, he was paid off rich, small-town rich. The kind of rich that doesn't show up in a man's shoes but shows up later, in a courthouse. Mom, Carol, died in March of 2023, and Dad grieved the way he fixed engines. Quietly, daily, without asking anyone to watch. Every Saturday night he wound the little brass clock she kept on the mantel, because Carol always said a stopped clock made a house feel dead. He cooked. He drove his 1978 F-150 that he'd restored bolt by bolt. He called me every Sunday, and I called him. We were fine. Everyone was fine. Then, on a bright October afternoon, my 73-year-old father climbed a ladder to clean his own gutters, because asking for help was never going to be his best event. He fell 8 feet and landed wrong. Broken right wrist, the kind that needs a small surgery, plates and pins, 6 to 8 weeks of healing. Not a tragedy. An inconvenience with hardware. I was mid-contract in Texas, and I still made it to the hospital in Cedar Falls inside 48 hours, because that's what you do. When I walked into his room, my sister Simone was already there with flowers, and her tears were arranged as carefully as the flowers. Her husband Braden was shaking the surgeon's hand like he was closing on a duplex. Braden sells mortgages. He has a voice like warm syrup and a handshake he practices. "You fly back to your patients, Amber," he told me, squeezing my shoulder. "Family takes care of family." At the time, it sounded like kindness. It took me months to hear it for what it was, a man assigning himself the keys. I did ask questions before I left. I'm a nurse. Discharge plans are my native language. I asked to see Dad's paperwork, his follow-up schedule, his medication list. Braden smiled and said it was all handled, all filed, all at the house. Simone said, "We've got this, sweetie. You're so far away." Dad, doped and cheerful in the bed, gave me a thumbs up with his good hand. "Go on, kiddo. I'm surrounded by professionals." So I flew back to Texas. I want to be honest with you about that, because it matters later. I didn't leave because I didn't care. I left because the 2 people standing closest to him kept telling me everything was handled, and one of them had already decided exactly how handled things were about to get. Dad moved into Simone and Braden's place that November, 15 minutes from his own house. "Just a few weeks," they said, until the cast came off. And here is where the first paper appeared, the honest one. His right hand was in a cast. He couldn't sign checks. He couldn't drive. So Braden brought in a notary and Dad signed a limited power of attorney. Bill paying only, with his clumsy left hand. I want you to hear me clearly. That document was legal, reasonable, and boring. Your own mother would have signed one. I would have. That's what makes this kind of thing work. It never starts with a crime. It starts with a favor. Simone posted a photo that week. Dad at her kitchen table, soup in front of him, caption reading, "Blessed to care for my daddy. Family is everything." 200 likes. Half of Cedar Falls commented hearts. Meanwhile, on a Sunday call, Braden was walking me through their plans and referred to Dad's house, the house on Maple Ridge, the one my parents paid off, as the asset. Dropped casually, the way you'd say, the weather. I noticed it. I even said, "You mean the house?" And he laughed and said, "Realtor brain, sorry." Dad noticed things too, he told me much later. He noticed Braden brought the power of attorney papers to his bedside instead of the kitchen table. He noticed the pen was already uncapped, but his wrist ached. The pain pills made everything feel like a matter for tomorrow, and the paper said what it said. Bills only. He read it twice and signed. It was the last thing they ever showed him before asking him to sign it. Then the wall went up, one polite brick at a time. My Sunday calls started landing on Simone instead of Dad. "He's napping." "He's tired, hun." "I'll tell him you called." 3 weeks straight, I did not hear my father's actual voice. His old flip phone broke. So I bought him a smartphone, set it up myself, loaded my number, and shipped it to Simone's house. The package went missing. I shipped a second one, with tracking this time. "Delivered," said the email. "Oh, that," Simone said. "Dad didn't want it. You know how he is with technology." My father rebuilt a carburetor the year he turned 70. He is not afraid of a telephone. I knew something was off. I want that on the record. I asked to talk to him directly. I offered to schedule a video call. I asked which doctor was following his wrist so I could call the office, and every single time I hit the same soft wall. "He's resting. We've got it. Why are you being like this?" Here's the thing nobody tells you about situations like ours. When a grown man is legally competent and his caregivers say he's fine, a daughter 2 states away has no lever to pull. There's no agency you call because your sister keeps answering the phone. I was a nurse under contract, 13 weeks locked, with loans to pay, and the only 2 witnesses inside that house kept smiling at me through it. Simone ended one of those calls with a line I've never forgotten. "You chose your career, Amber. Let the people who stayed handle it." I flew home for Christmas anyway, and at that dinner table my father's chair had been moved to the corner. Christmas of 2025. Dad had just turned 74 that December, and the cast was off. But something else had been fitted onto him, a smallness. He sat in the corner of Simone's living room while she answered questions aimed at him. "Dad, how's the wrist?" "It's healing great, isn't it, Daddy?" He was thinner, quieter. His coffee was decaf, doctor's orders, though no doctor of his had ever said so. I got him alone for 10 minutes on the back porch, both of us pretending we needed air in 30-degree weather. He looked at me sideways with the old spark and said, "My checkbook's been on a diet, kiddo." I asked what he meant. He said statements used to come to the house on Maple Ridge. Now everything was paperless, and the passwords lived with Braden. He'd asked to see the accounts twice. Both times, Braden clapped him on the shoulder and said, "That's what you got me for." I went back inside and asked Simone calmly in the kitchen if we could all sit down after the holidays and go over Dad's finances together. Braden materialized like he'd been summoned. "Family doesn't need lawyers, Amber, unless you're accusing somebody." Notice the move. I asked about statements. He introduced the word lawyers. Then Simone started crying, right on schedule, about everything she does, about how nobody appreciates the person who stayed, and my father, because he is decent, and because decent men make soft hostages, patted my arm and said, "I'm fine, kiddo. Don't start a war at Christmas." On January 6th, I signed another 13-week contract in Texas. I've signed a lot of paperwork in my life. That was the most expensive signature of mine you'll hear about tonight. By February, the Sunday calls had gone from screen to scripted, and I'd had enough. I took 4 days off between shifts, told nobody, and flew home. My little ambush of love. Simone opened her door surprised and recovered fast. Oh no, you just missed him. He's on an overnight fishing trip with the VFW boys. Bad timing, sweetie. Fishing. In Ohio. In February. I drove to Dad's house on Maple Ridge and stood in the yard a while. Grass gone shaggy under the frost. Mailbox stuffed. Curtains shut tight. A house holding its breath. On the way out of town, I stopped for gas and ran into Earl Prescott. My father's oldest friend, 75 years old, ran the Prescott Funeral Home for 4 decades before his sons took it over, buried half of Cedar Falls with his own hands and cried at most of them. Earl looked at me strangely. Moses hasn't been to a post meeting in 3 months, honey. We figured he moved in with you. Not on a fishing trip with them? Not at meetings at all. I called Simone from the gas station lot. She didn't even pause. Oh, it's not the VFW crowd, it's his other buddies. You don't know them. A lie stacked neatly on a lie, like cordwood. I flew back to Texas with my stomach in a knot, and 3 days later Simone texted me a photo. Dad in an armchair, smiling thinly, holding that day's mood hostage. Dad's doing great, stop checking up on us. I stared at that picture a long time. There was a detail in it. Small, ordinary, right there in the background, that I wouldn't understand for another 5 months. When I finally did, it changed how I saw every photo she'd ever sent. My contract ended the first week of May 2026, and I came home to Columbus with a plan to drive to Cedar Falls unannounced and refuse to leave without seeing my father. The phone rang before I'd unpacked. June Hetler, a nurse I'd worked med-surg with years ago, 58, sharp as a lancet. The kind of woman who notices everything and forgives most of it. She'd taken a job at a long-term care facility called Crest Haven Manor, out near the Indiana line, 170 miles from my kitchen. Her voice was careful. Amber, there's a resident here, came in back in March. He asks every nurse on every shift if they know a nurse named Amber. Says she's his daughter. I couldn't speak. June kept going. Gentle, professional. His name is Moses Dawson, honey. Is that your father? I stood in the middle of my kitchen with my keys still in my hand. Nobody had said the words nursing home to me. Not once, not in any call, not in any text. As far as I'd been told, my father was eating pot roast 15 minutes from his own house. June said one more thing before I hung up, and it's the thing that put me in the car. Amber. He doesn't present like a placement. He presents like somebody misplaced him. I didn't call Simone. I didn't call Brayden. There are conversations you have by phone, and there are conversations you have in person, in daylight, with paperwork. I got in the car. Before I tell you what I found in that building, let me say this to every one of you with an aging parent. Ask them today, kindly, over coffee. Who holds your power of attorney, and have you seen your own bank statement this month? Not to accuse anyone, just to know. It's the one question I didn't ask in time, and it cost my father everything but his life. If this story is hitting home, take 2 seconds and hit subscribe, because what my father did when he got out deserves witnesses, and you're going to want to be one of them. 3 hours of highway, and I spent every mile of it being a nurse, because being a daughter would have put me in a ditch. Cresthaven Manor sat off a county road behind a sign with 2 burned-out letters. Inside, the smell hit first. Cheap disinfectant over something older. A call light blinking down the hall with nobody moving toward it. A television talking to a row of empty chairs. I counted staff the way I count on every unit I've ever walked. 1 aide for a wing that needed 4. The medication cart parked and locked at 11 in the morning with the 9 o'clock meds still signed out as pending. I don't say any of this to shame the aides. Understaffed people can't pour from an empty building. I say it because my father had been living in it for 10 weeks, while my sister posted about family being everything. He was in a shared room at the end of the East Hall. Second bed, by the window that didn't open. My father, Moses Dawson, who once carried an engine block across a shop floor out of pure stubbornness, was maybe 15 pounds lighter, gray stubble on his jaw, wearing a shirt I didn't recognize that fit him like a borrowed apology. But his eyes came up when the door opened, and his eyes were his eyes. Sharp, whole, present. He looked at me a long second, and what he said first broke me worse than tears would have. "Took you long enough, kiddo. They told me you knew. Told me you signed off on it." They hadn't just hidden him from me, they'd hidden me from him, and told each of us the other one had agreed to all of it. We spent an hour untangling 7 months of careful lying, and every knot had the same 2 sets of fingerprints on it. His flip phone hadn't broken. Simone took it. To protect him from scam calls. My smartphones never reached him. He'd never heard about either one. My letters, and I'd sent 4, never made it past whoever collected the mail. Back in March, Braden told him they needed him out of the house for 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. While they repaired the guest room floor. The 2 weeks came and went. When Dad pushed, Braden's answers got shorter. And then one day the answers were a hallway at Cresthaven and a roommate named Gus, who yelled at the ceiling after dark. And through all of it, they'd told him I knew. That I was too busy. That the nurse couldn't be bothered with her own father. He kept a torn corner of an envelope in his wallet with my old cell number on it in pencil. The only number they couldn't cancel. But the hall phone required staff to dial out, and staff at Cresthaven were a rumor. I did what I do. I asked him the date, the month, the president. I had him count backward from 100 by 7s just to see him roll his eyes at me. "It's Tuesday, I'm in a purgatory, and your quiz is easier than one of Braden's mortgage pitches." Sharp as ever. There was nothing wrong with my father's mind, and that fact was about to matter enormously. Then he glanced at the door, lowered his voice, and said the sentence that turned my worry into something colder. "Kiddo, whatever paper they used to put me in here, I never signed a second one." I walked to the front office with my RN license number ready and my nurse voice on. The administrator was a tired man with a tie the color of oatmeal, and he recited the script he'd been handed. Only the responsible party could authorize a transfer, and the responsible party was Mr. Braden Voss, who held power of attorney. I asked one question. "Does Mr. Dawson have a diagnosis of cognitive impairment on file? Dementia? Incapacity? Anything?" Silence while he clicked. There wasn't one, because none exists. My father was admitted as a voluntary placement on paperwork submitted by his POA, with a vague letter about needing support with daily living. A competent adult is not a package in storage. He can discharge himself. Full stop. I said it politely, and then, because the tie kept opening and closing his mouth, I added, "Or we can call the long-term care ombudsman together and walk through the intake file page by page. I have the afternoon." It's remarkable how fast paperwork appears when you offer to read it with a state official. 20 minutes later, my father sat at that desk and signed his own discharge, right-handed, healed, unhurried. Letters carved clean, the M leaning left the way it has since 1974. "First thing I've signed in 6 months, he said to the room, and it's a jailbreak." June hugged him at the door and tucked a sleeve of cookies from the staff room into his jacket like contraband. The facility would notify the POA by certified mail, the administrator said. "Fine," I said, "mail takes days." On the drive home, somewhere past the county line, Dad watched the fields peel by and said quietly, "They think I'm filed away, kiddo. Let's not correct them just yet." I set Dad up in my apartment in Columbus, my couch pulled out, his blood pressure pills refilled, real coffee, caffeinated, doctor's orders be damned. Then we went to a bank branch together, because Moses Dawson was still the account holder of record, and an account holder is entitled to his own statements. The printout was 11 pages. He read them the way he used to read a diagnostic report on a wrecked engine. Slow, twice, no cursing. In 5 months from November through March, $187,000 had left my father's accounts. 46,000 of it labeled care expenses. For a man eating instant potatoes at Cresthaven. 89,000 wired to something called BV Capital LLC. You can guess whose initials those are. $52,000 to a loan servicer attached to a condo in Florida that Simone and Braden bought in 2022 at the top of the market. $25,000 remained, a working man's whole quiet fortune, gone in a season. And stapled behind the statements, a courtesy copy of something worse. A home equity line of credit application on the Maple Ridge house. $150,000, pending approval, signed Moses Dawson on April 14th. On April 14th, my father was 170 miles away, asking nurses if anyone knew his daughter. I called Simone that night. One call, one chance, and I kept my voice level. "Tell me your side, I'm listening." What she said back told me everything about where her heart had gone. "You were never really in this family, Amber. Don't you dare lecture the one who stayed." So we stopped asking family for answers. We hired a woman whose entire job is paperwork. Patricia Whitfield, elder law, 61 years old, reading glasses on a chain and a handshake like a filing cabinet closing. Her office smelled like toner and lemon drops. She listened to the whole story without moving, then said the sentence that made my father fall professionally in love. "Documents don't cry, Mr. Dawson. That's why I like them." She moved fast and completely legally, and I want you to hear the order, because this is the part that protects people. First, Dad signed a notarized revocation of every power of attorney in existence, delivered to the bank, the county recorder, and every institution he'd ever touched. Second, a signature dispute letter to the HELOC lender, which froze that application where it stood. No money had moved yet, which meant the house was still clean. Third, a report to Adult Protective Services and a fraud affidavit with the bank, both of which start clocks that even a smooth talker can't stop. Then Patricia laid out the problem. "Civil recovery, I can get. Criminal intent is harder. He'll say Dad authorized everything verbally. These men always say that." And buried in the bank's file was the thing we didn't have before. A second power of attorney, full financial authority, notarized January 12th, submitted in January. The one Dad never signed. Patricia slid it across the desk. "For criminal charges, it helps enormously if they use a forged instrument again. Somewhere public, somewhere witnessed. Fraud in a drawer is a lawsuit. Fraud performed for an audience is a conviction." My father studied that page for a long, quiet minute. The loops of a signature that wasn't his, over his own name. Then he looked up at me and asked me to bring him his Army discharge papers. We drove to Cedar Falls on a Tuesday morning when Braden would be at his office selling somebody a 30-year promise. My key still fit the back door of the Maple Ridge house. Some oversights are gifts. Inside, the air was stale in a way that insulted him. The file drawers in the den hung open, picked over. Mom's suitcase sat unzipped on the guest bed with her good jewelry box empty beside it. And on the mantel, Carol's little brass clock stood dead at some long-gone afternoon because no one had wound it in 7 months. Dad stood in the middle of his own living room like a man visiting a museum of his life. 7 months, he said. The house doesn't even smell like mine anymore. Then he went to the bedroom and knelt, slow but steady, and pulled his old Army footlocker from under the bed. Still locked. The one thing in that house Braden hadn't cracked. Because to a man like Braden, an old soldier's box is furniture. Inside, in order, squared away like it was 1974. His DD 214 discharge papers with his true signature inked when he was 22. The original deed to the house, his medals, wrapped in a handkerchief. And a letter, envelope soft with handling, marked in my mother's round hand. For Moses, when I can't say it myself. He didn't open that one there. He carried the whole locker to the kitchen, set it on the table where every big decision in our family has ever been made, and laid the forged power of attorney down next to his discharge papers. Then my father went very, very quiet, and I have learned to pay attention when quiet men get quieter. 2 pieces of paper side by side on a kitchen table in the house they were both about 52 years apart. The signature on the DD 214, 1974. The M in Moses. Leaning hard left, like a man walking into wind. The crossbar of the T in Dawson dragging long past the letter, a tail on it, always. Ink pressed deep. He signs like he means it. And then the signature on the second power of attorney, dated January 12, 2026. Round, even, polite. Every letter behaving. Prettier than I ever wrote in my life, Dad said, tapping it, even before the wrist. But handwriting wasn't the knife. The date was the knife. I'd already pulled his medical records. He'd signed a release making me his healthcare contact the day after the jailbreak. And on January 12th, my father was at the orthopedic clinic from 9 in the morning until 11:30, having hardware checked under light sedation, initialed in by a medical assistant at every step. The notary stamp on that power of attorney says it was executed at 10:15 that same morning at an office 20 miles from the clinic. A man cannot be sedated in one town and signing in another. The paper didn't just lie. The paper told on itself. Dad sat back, and something in his face settled. Grief clocking out, and a decision clocking in. Dead men don't sign papers, he said. I asked him what that meant. Their notary friend stamped a ghost, kiddo. So let's introduce them to a real one. Then he opened my mother's letter at last, and read it alone by the window, and when he came back to the table he only shared one line with me. Don't you let the quiet ones fool you, and don't you dare go quiet yourself. The certified letter from Cresthaven landed in the Voss mailbox that Friday, and my phone started detonating before noon. Braden, voicemail 1, syrup gone, all vinegar. You have removed an at-risk senior from a care facility without authorization. That's kidnapping, Amber. Kidnap-ping. A mortgage broker quoting law is a dog quoting the mailman, but I'll grant him this. He'd learned the vocabulary. Voicemail 3 threatened an emergency guardianship petition. Dad was confused, declining, being manipulated by a daughter after his money. Read that sentence again and appreciate the craftsmanship. Accuse the other side of the exact crime in your own pocket. Patricia was serene. Guardianship requires an independent medical evaluation. Your father will pass it like a driving test. But she didn't sugarcoat the rest. A contested guardianship takes weeks, gets loud, smears everyone, and, here was the real play, buys time. Time for a frozen HELOC to thaw if the dispute hiccuped. Time to move what was left. Men like Braden don't fight to win. They fight to keep the clock running while the money finds the exits. That night, Simone sent me a single text. No greeting. Dad will choose us. He always needs the ones who stay. You've got a career and an empty apartment. He'll figure out which daughter actually built a life around him. I read it to Dad because we'd agreed. No more secrets managed on his behalf. By anyone. Ever. He looked at it, then out the window, then said in the mildest voice you ever heard. She thinks staying close to a man is the same as standing by him. He handed me back the phone. Call Earl. Tell him I finally need that favor he's owed me since 1976. He laid it out at my kitchen table at 9 o'clock at night, over decaf he'd poured himself as a joke. They need me incapacitated or dead to finish this, he said. Guardianship's their incapacitated play. Slow. Public. So let's give them the other option, the one with better catering. I actually laughed, and then I saw his eyes and stopped. He meant it. Let them believe he had died. Not a fake death certificate. Not a false report to any agency, not an obituary in any paper. He'd thought about the lines and refused to cross them. No government paper, no insurance, no cops lied to. Just one phone call, friend to family, and a memorial his buddies throw him. Lying to liars isn't a felony, kiddo. I checked. Twice. The logic underneath was pure Patricia, even though she'd never touched the theatrics. Greed is a reflex. Tell Simone and Braden the man is gone, and they will not pause to grieve. They will produce that forged will and claim the estate in front of God and everybody, because they cannot afford probate questions later. Using a forged document in public, out loud, to witnesses, has an ugly legal name, and it comes with handcuffs. They wouldn't be trapped by us. They'd be trapped by their own paperwork, doing what it was always for. I sat with it, and my old habit spoke first. The one that thinks I'm responsible for every outcome in every room. If this goes sideways, you're the one they'll call crazy. They'll use it in the guardianship. He nodded like he'd already been there. I've been called worse by better. Then he smiled, and for a second he was 50 again. We just need a man the whole town believes. Lucky for us, I know the fella who buried half of it. Earl Prescott listened to the whole plan on his back porch with a coffee going cold in his hand, and when Dad finished, Earl was silent about 5 seconds, which for Earl is a filibuster. Then, I've buried 4 mayors and 1 man I truly didn't care for. This'll be my first rehearsal. That's how the old guard says yes. Understand who these men are. Earl ran the Prescott Funeral Home for 40 years. His word on a passing is gospel in 3 counties. His sons run it now, but nobody in Cedar Falls would question Earl Prescott calling with sad news, which is exactly why he'd be the one to make the call. One call only, personal, to Simone. Her father collapsed, and he was gone. Every word deniable as a misunderstanding between old men, and none of it anywhere near an official. June's part was even cleaner. If anyone phoned Cresthaven asking after Moses Dawson, she'd confirm only what was true. Mr. Dawson is no longer with us here. And let a guilty imagination do the heavy lifting. The VFW would host a memorial gathering that Sunday, organized by his Post brothers, the way they've done for every one of their own for 60 years. And Patricia? Patricia would know nothing about any theatrics. Officially or actually. She'd simply attend a community memorial as a guest, the way small-town lawyers do, with her briefcase, because she never goes anywhere without it. If certain documents happen to be waved around in public, well, she'd be there with the real ones. Earl asked Dad one final logistics question. What flowers? Lilies, Dad said. Carol hated lilies. She won't mind missing this one. Now, I know some of you are yelling at your screens right now. Just sue them, Amber. We could have. We'd have likely won, in 2 years, quietly, in a beige hallway. But my father wanted more than his money back. He wanted his town to see who they were, with their own eyes, in real time. If you've ever watched a smooth talker